What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Relaxed and Fast. Today, we are back talking about the difference between being good and being great. Today's conversation ended up being incredibly intellectual, and we got into a lot of topics that are going to help you out a lot moving forward if you're somebody who's starting an indoor track season or any new aspect of your life as this new year begins. Make sure you guys leave a 5-star review if you're listening on Spotify, and if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you're enjoying the conversation. Without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, welcome back to Relaxed and Fast, episode 2 here. I'm Dylan.
I'm Anthony.
Coach Evie.
Today we're going to be talking about being good versus being great. I think a lot of people kind of lump those two things together, and average listener might just think that that's the same thing. But as you get into something, especially in the context of a sport, you realize that those can't be further apart. So, starting the question off right away, what do you think is the difference between being good and great?
I think people that are good show up and do what's asked of them. I think people that want to be great go above and beyond. I think they're the ones that are the first to practice, the last to leave. They're the ones that are asking for more. They're the ones that are doing the extras on their own time. They're, foam rolling before bed. They're getting up in the morning and they have a good routine. They're paying attention to their sleep hygiene and their nutrition and their hydration. And, it becomes more of a lifestyle rather than just checking a box type of thing. So I think ultimately, I think people that are good also, I don't know if cutting corners is necessarily the way to look at it, but man, the weather hasn't been great the past couple days, and I think people that want to be great or people that are great are the ones that it doesn't matter.
Yep.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Like my alarm is going off, I'm getting up, I'm getting my mileage in, I'm getting my core work in, I'm getting my cross training in, whatever it happens to be that they need to do for that. I'm going to get my long run in. They make time to do the things that they need to do to be truly next level. You hear the story of the guys on the Olympic team with Kobe who, I'm going to get up and I'm going to be the first guy to the gym and 6 a.m. and I'm going to be ready to go, and Kobe was already done with his workout.
Yep.
And that to me is the difference between good and great. Those guys, and you could even argue the rest of those Olympians were probably great basketball players, but they weren't one of the greatest, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that those are the things, and I think, and we'll probably end up talking about this a little bit more in depth later, but consistency. Consistency,
And I feel like that comes from a place of like the discipline and like not even just motivation but discipline. Like you have to be disciplined with it, and like it like I was once told like successful people find ways.
Yeah.
And so like going off what you said, like no matter the condition, no matter how it is outside, no matter how it is in your just life, you have to find a way, dude. Like you got to get it done, like you got to get the work in, like, which I think is a great way to think. And I've caught myself trying to slack, and I say, nah, successful people find ways, it does not matter. like, which I think is a great philosophy, a great teaching, and a way to like tell athletes of like, you got to find a way if you want to be on that level. Because do you think it's a choice, like, to be on that level?
That's a really interesting question. I'm pausing because my brain is going to there's multiple different levels of great, right?
Yeah.
We have kids on the team that aren't as talented as Dylan, but they can become great in their own way.
Yeah.
And they can reach their potential, right? What is that? What is that to the individual? And that's ultimately what I am trying to do, is to pull as much as I can out of each and every athlete so that they can become great for their abilities and what the hand that they've been dealt.
the
So
best version of themselves.
Right, and so are they going to be the greatest to ever walk the hallways of Baldwin Wallace? Like, are they going to be better than Harrison Dillard, a 4-time Olympian? I probably not, right? Probably not.
Yeah.
But they can become great for them, and they can learn all of the life lessons along the way to become as successful as they can possibly become. So, coming back to John Wooden, right? He was really big on success and being successful on a daily basis, and he had games where they won by 50, and he would go into the locker room. He'd be really upset because they didn't play defense at the best level that they could.
Yeah.
They allowed the other team to score more points than they should have. And they had games where they lost, where he walked in and said, "Guys, I think we played about as well as we could, and I think we had a successful game today. The other team just had a more successful game than we did."
Yeah.
And so, if you're having the conversation of the greatest of all time, I think there's a lot that goes into that. There's some genetics that I'm never gonna win an Olympic gold medal.
Yeah.
I tried to reach my potential and tried to max myself out, and I just didn't have those genetic gifts. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't chasing greatness at some point in time.
100%. Everybody has a different ceiling. Yeah.
I think that's something really important that you brought up, because in a world where it's constant comparing to other people, like you have social media and you're seeing these people that are going to the Olympics, these people that are going to national meets, and it's important to remember, yes, you want to be the greatest person that you can be, but your greatest might not be someone else's.
Yeah.
You might be giving 100% and you're not going to make it to that level, and that's okay as long as you're doing everything that you can do.
Yeah, and I think having an honest conversation with yourself, there's plenty of kids that say they want to be great, or they want to qualify to nationals, or they want to achieve some large goal, conference champ, whatever it is, that don't do the things that they need to do to get there. And they're not even doing the bare minimum to like, they're not even showing up to practice every day type of thing. So like, there is that piece to it too.
Take like a kid who what has that goal but doesn't work for it, right? And they just are saying that they're all talk versus a kid who has action, right? Even if he's not the most talented, do you still believe like hard work outworks talent most of the time?
I think most of the time, I think once again, Jakob Ingebrigtsen could stop training for months at a time and still beat anybody on our team.
Yeah, 100%.
He's just more talented.
Yeah.
But I think, within each level, most of the people that are arriving at Division III in the OAC, at Baldwin Wallace, like, are going to have similar chances to achieve some impressive things. And there's been, Spencer Mahan is a guy that was an 18-minute, 5-minute guy in high school and ended up scoring points at the conference meet in the 10K. And he worked really hard. He was really, really successful for where he started to where he ended and all of those types of things. And so I think I got off track there a little bit. Tend to stray on some of my answers, but hopefully I answered that.
No, that was perfectly answered. I think using Spencer as a example is like perfect. Yeah. Somebody who just works so hard, they hit some level of greatness. For them, everybody has a different peak. Everybody has a different ceiling.
Yeah.
And your whole coaching philosophy, training philosophy is become the best version of yourself in every aspect of life. So I think that highlights that perfectly. But my next question for you is like, what is the biggest thing that you did as an athlete when you were running competitively, from being good, from being average to being the great athlete that you became?
I thought I worked really hard in high school. I was into running. I bought a handful of running books. I tried to read them. I listened to my coach. I followed his philosophy. We were definitely a lower mileage at the time. And so, and I saw some success at that level. Not a ton of success. No, Division I schools weren't beating down my door to come recruit me or anything like that. But I think the biggest shock for me when I went to college was they ran a lot more. They ran a lot more mileage, and I struggled with that. I went from, most of the time in season we were running like maybe 30, 35 miles a week, mostly in the 20s, to trying to run 50 to 60.
Yeah.
And I got hurt. Quite a bit, even the summer going into it, because I started hanging out with a bunch of guys that were going to D1 schools that were really good Division I high school runners and, all state type performers and all that kind of stuff going into my freshman year. And I got hurt before I even showed up on campus. And so I think the transition from being this fairly okay high school runner to a guy that was qualifying to nationals and trying to be an All-American, trying to win a national championship is that I always tried to find the people within my bubble that were the best and figure out what they were doing. And so that starts when I went to Mount. I figured out which guys on the team were the best, and I started hanging around and trying to do the things that they were doing. And then as we went around and we started going to track meets and I started meeting guys from the other teams that were better than some of the guys on my team, I would try to warm up and cool down with them and pick their brains. And then when I made the national meet, same thing. I'm trying to meet those guys and trying to figure out. I remember sitting in the call room, which was the holding area at Ohio Northern. I just finished 5th at nationals in the 1500, and we're sitting down there, and all the All-Americans were sitting in this room. And how many miles a week are you planning on running next week? And all these guys are talking about running 95, 85 miles a week, and I was running like 60, 65. I'm like, how the heck am I ever going to beat these guys if I don't start running that mileage? Now, I probably bumped my mileage up a little too quick, and that outdoor season didn't go as well as I wanted, but I was at least on the right path. I was coming off of a summer where I lived here in Berea with Tim Budick, who was one of the best guys, if not the best guy in the conference. He was the first guy not to make the national meet in both the 1500 indoors and the steeple outdoors. And so essentially, I had the opportunity to come up and live and train with him for a summer, and why not, right? He's one of the best guys. He made the national meet in cross country, and so I just started doing what he was doing, and I figured out that the plan that my coach had written up for me over the summer wasn't going to be enough. And that's when Coach Brown came on board, and I'll never forget, he called me just to introduce himself and chat a little bit, and he was like, well, how was your week this past week? And I ran like 45 miles, and my long run wasn't great, so I went a little bit shorter. And he pretty much, we were only like 4 or 5 minutes into the conversation, was like, well, why don't you get a better weekend next week, and we'll talk when you're actually serious about this. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
And this is a guy that I immensely looked up to, right?
Yeah.
And so I essentially got off the phone with him, and I went up into the attic with Tim, and I was like, hey, how many miles are you running next week? And he's like, I think I'm going to run like 65 or 70. I'm like, I'm just going to start doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I essentially went from thinking I was going to run like 60, 65 that summer to running 70 the whole summer and hitting a couple of like 80-mile weeks.
Yeah.
And then, surprise, surprise, that was the year that I was MVP of the conference and an All-American indoors and all that kind of stuff. Mm. And so I think just continually trying to... I've always kind of been a nerd about running, and so trying to learn from other people. I'm still in touch with a guy named Todd Gerwig, who was national runner-up in the 800. He ran for Heidelberg. I would follow him around like a little lost puppy dog. And we've talked about this post-college, right, at this point as adults, and how he always remembered me walking around with my big headphones on with my punk music going, and, just trying to figure stuff out for him. And he's like, I figured out at some point in time that you were probably going to exceed what the level I was even at. Now, I never got to the point where I was national runner-up, but, it's kind of awesome to hear that from him, because he was somebody that I also looked up to a ton as well.
Yeah, which I see with what you said. You're like, I started, studying and like surrounding and picking people's brains that were better than me, see what they're doing, because I want to be on their level.
Yeah.
And that's something you take now. You go and tell us that now. You're like, surround yourself with the right people, right? Go take these people's advices. Like, if you want to be good, you'll surround yourself with the good people and not the people who are doing the wrong things, right? It's about the people you surround yourself, which is something that you highlight so heavily in your coaching philosophy. So it's very interesting that you took that from your background, right, and you kind of added that to your coaching philosophy, and that's just something that's really interesting. So I mean, the next question I have is, like, from those lessons that you've experienced back in your athletic career, how do you bring that transition from good to great into your coaching philosophy now? Like, what do you tell athletes on our team here? Like, what do you tell them now to get them to that level? Like, say somebody wanted to come to you and be like, I want to be the best I can be, the greatest I can. What do you tell them?
I'm gonna twist on your question a little bit. So come back to the last part of that, because I'll forget, because I'm gonna go down a different path. I think how do I take what I've learned as an athlete into my coaching is I try to lead by example. I try to talk about all of the extra stuff that I do outside of practice and work, so that you guys can understand what I'm trying to give back to you guys. Because I think as an athlete, a lot of times you just think the coach shows up with the whistle and throws the balls out and we have practice and then I go home and just hang out. And that is just not the case.
Yeah.
It's not the case. And so if I'm going to be asking a lot from you all, I want you all to know that I am doing a lot on my part to try to provide the best experience that I can for you. And whether that's listening to audiobooks, reading physical books, listening to podcasts, trying to do research to help you all, trying to surround myself with really good people, Dr. Locke, Coach Metzger, all of the other, Coach Flyock, trying to bring some of those people into the mix as well and get their opinions and all of that kind of stuff. Because it takes what it takes, right?
Yeah.
If you truly want to be the best, that you want to be the greatest, you want to be the greatest version of yourself, or whatever that means, right? It takes what it takes. There is no getting around truly being the best that you can possibly be. And so I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to make this program the best that I can be. This podcast is a perfect example of that. This is something that I think can help our program get better.
100%.
It will be time consuming for you all. It will be time consuming for me, but I think it's something that it's an extra thing, such as doing your correctives and so on and so forth. It all kind of translates. And so I think leading by example is a big part of it. I run every day, right?
Yeah.
And so when people are like, "Oh, coach, I didn't have time to run," dude, I work way more hours than the average person. And still, now I ran a mile today, right? I'm not cranking out a ton of mileage, but I still am making time to do this every day, and something is better than nothing. And I've maintained a fairly decent level of fitness throughout my life by doing that. And so once again, trying to lead by example. And then the lack of empathy on my part when people are like, "Oh, I didn't have time to run." It's just not there, because once again, I'm making time to do this. I'm making time for you to have those individual meetings and all that stuff. So
which a lot of your day is individual meetings.
Right.
So it is interesting. You do find time to run, and now we also see that a lot. You post now every day where I ran today. Yeah. This is what I did today. And I think that's also showing your athletes, like, I did it, you can do it. Like, that you're capable of this, and I think that's really strong. That's a strong message.
One of the wrestling coach that really got Wartburg's program rolling and won like a million national championships and all that kind of stuff, came and spoke to our coaching staff a few years back, and he talked about throwing darts. And one of the best things you can do as a coach is just continue to throw darts and find, because a dart that might work for him might not work for you, but I just got to keep trying with you and just keep throwing darts, right, until you hit the bullseye and figure out what it is that makes you tick. And so all of these things that we're talking about is just me trying to throw darts, right? I'm just trying to continue to figure out and hone, and once I throw a bullseye, okay, I need to keep doing that.
Yeah.
But I also got to do all these other things too to figure out how to get myself to the best of my ability.
Would you say that's like a little bit of like trial and error?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Some of it's just picking up the phone and talking to some of my coaching buddies on my drives home. talking to my mentors, talking to, listening to podcasts, all this, trying to read. I try to read as much as I can. I think I hit 33 books last year, which that's the most
great.
I've ever had.
That's great.
So
That's great.
And so trying to throw some of that stuff in there too. I'm doing the daily Stoic New Year, New You challenge. So I'm always trying to find different ways to improve who I am and things that'll help me get better at what I'm doing.
That's interesting. So the other question I had was, if one of your athletes now comes up to you and says, Coach, I want to be great. I want to be the greatest version of myself. I want to be the best I can be. What do you say? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, once again, it takes what it takes. And so if this is truly what you want to do, I think I can lay the blueprint out for you. But ultimately, I can't force you to do. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Yeah. And so I don't think it's necessarily something that you can specifically say in the moment. Well, here's the plan. We just have to follow the plan. You just have to be consistent. I think it's the follow-up of, hey, I saw this social media post. This doesn't fit with what you told me you wanted to become. Yeah. And having that very difficult conversation at times and figuring out, is this somebody I want to continue to invest my time, energy, and effort into, or are they just telling me what I want to hear so that I will leave them alone? And if that's the case, then I stop investing time slowly but surely until they prove to me that they want to be a part of this, that they want to be great at
That's a good take.
Because I had a kid on the team at McPherson named David Johnson. I think he ran a 2:16, 800 was his lifetime PR, right? And he was like a 2:25 guy when he started or something along those lines. He was a dude that showed up every day and worked really hard, and he'd come in and meet with me every once in a while, and I'm going to give him the same energy that I would give either of you guys, right? If he's going to show up and put that time and energy in, because you never know who's going to become the next Spencer Mahan. You never know who's going to become the next Andrew Krupp or whoever, Hastings Merrick, right? You never know who that next person is going to be. So I'm always willing to invest that time. I just want to see it back.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
And I think, really quickly, I want to touch on this. I remember I overheard a conversation you were telling, I think it was David last year, and you were saying something along the lines of, like, sometimes it gets hard to get your runs in and you don't want to get this stuff done like you were saying earlier. And sometimes you just want to go out and just say, I'm just going to run 1 mile. And then after that 1 mile, 99.9% of the time you're going to feel good enough and want to keep going. And that's something that I have personally instilled, and never once have I not done the full run after I've had that mindset. I'll say, I'll go out, and if I don't feel good, I'll turn around. But you always end up feeling better once you get out there.
All the research shows the hardest part is getting out the door. And so when I was in Wichita, I was trying to make a go at training and competing at a high level. And so I was starting to get really, really fit again. And the last run I did with the Wichita State group was something like a 16 or 18 mile long run, and we were cutting down the last 4 or 5 miles or like 5:30 or 5:20 pace. Like, we were freaking rolling, and it was on these like rolling hills out, and we were at like a camp out in western Kansas and all this stuff. And the next week I took the job at Nebraska and immediately went into working like 80, 90 hours a week. And I got sick my first week that I was there. And I remember this date because it's when my running streak started. I was on day 2 of being sick, and I hadn't run because I was sick, and I wanted to rest and put my energy into my new job and try to promote it that way. And I went out for a run. I felt awful, and I realized that training at that level and getting workouts in was probably out the door. And so I needed to find something else that was going to keep me motivated to run every day. And I'd had a running streak in college. One of my buddies, Fred Kieser, had a streak of like multiple years in a row and all this stuff through Olympic trial marathons and so on and so forth. He had this, like, it might have even been like 10 years long. And so I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to run every day. And at that point in time, I'd set the limit of like 25 minutes. It's become shorter over time. This morning I ran a mile.
So we just had a little bit of technical difficulty, but picking up where we left off, the camera just overheated a little bit. But picking up where we left off, Coach, you were talking about your running streak, how you shortened your time limit over the years.
Yeah. So I started with, you know, kind of a minimum of 25 minutes. And I started on September 14th of 2012. I did not take a single day off until July 24th or 23rd of 2020 because I had surgery. And then, or no, it would have been 2 weeks prior to that was the surgery. And then I started back up on July 25th. And I haven't taken a day off since then. And so I think really just the consistency of that is something that I try to get across to the team and all that kind of stuff.
Because that consistency, I mean, we'll get into this a little bit later, but that consistency ends up adding up in the end and has huge benefits.
Oh yeah.
Which we will get into that towards the end of this because there is a question based on it. Yeah. But I'm going to move us into our next question. In a world that is built around instant gratification, we have apps like TikTok now where you can immediately scroll every 2 seconds, and this is something you talk about because we hate doom scrolling here.
Yeah.
And you know, we have things like Amazon where you order a package and it's there either the same or next day. We have stuff like that and instant gratification all around us, right? Everything is just immediately. How do you work around that and just trust the process? How do you tell an athlete, like, hey, it's not going to happen overnight and you just need to keep working and trust that process that the work pays off?
One of the most prolific books I've ever read is 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. It's actually banned in the prison system. You're not allowed to read it as a prisoner because it'll help you like manipulate the system and people around you and all that kind of stuff. And one of the chapters in there is essentially about taking the magic pill or selling snake oil. And I think about this a lot because I think there are other people out there that will sell a different package to individuals, whether it be adult runners, high school kids, college kids, recruits, whatever it might be, like this quick fix. If you come here, you're instantly going to get better. Yeah. I don't feel good about doing that. I don't feel good about doing that because the reality is that there is no quick fix for distance running. Consistency over days, weeks, months, years is really what our sport comes down to. My ultimate goal is to help produce lifelong runners as well, to have everybody have a passion for the sport. Something I thought about a lot over break was, how do I do a better job of teaching individuals so that they can coach themselves a little bit, so they don't have to rely on me as heavily to write up their weekly stuff, and they can almost write their week and say, Coach, does this look okay?
Yeah.
Because ultimately it really just is, it really is just about putting the time in and showing up and doing it, right? Really good writers become good writers because they write a lot. I just watched Tick, Tick, Boom, and took him 8 years to write this musical. The dude who wrote Rent, right? One of the most popular longest running Broadway shows of all time. And he wrote it and it didn't get picked up. And it was like his masterpiece, and it took him 8 years, and that was supposed to get him out of the crappy apartment and all that stuff. And his agent pretty much told him, he's like, what do I do? And she's like, write another one, and then write another one, and then write another one. And unfortunately for society as a whole, if you like Rent, and in music theater, he tragically passed away at 35 years old, and we didn't really get to see what he could produce and how many more masterpieces could he have ended up making. But you know, his first one that he wrote, that he took all that time on, took forever, and then he had to get back to work and had to keep writing. You know, Ryan Holiday, one of my favorite authors, essentially pumps out a book a year, and he has since he's been in his 20s. He writes every day, and he has his routine, and he talks about time being the most precious thing, and what are you going to invest your time in, and that's how he pays his bills, is through writing. Now he has podcasts and a bookstore and all these other things too, but ultimately it all started with him becoming a researcher for Robert Greene, who I just talked about, and then but ultimately with our sport, once again, I've been able to maintain a pretty decent level of fitness because I run every day.
Yeah.
Because I literally just get out the door, and at this point in time, as much to the demise of all of you guys, like, I'm not going to train at that high of a level anymore. I don't have the desire to do it, and B, I don't feel like I have the time to put into really trying to achieve that level. But I do want to be able to run with people every day, and I want to be able to be fit enough that if we're at team camp or whatever, I can jump in on a 6, 7, 8 mile run with you guys and not be completely gassed for the rest of the day. That I can do long runs with the girls. I can meet up with buddies over breaks and in mornings and run with our alums and Kelly and Isaac and all that and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually saw, excuse me. I actually saw this quote in this book I am reading right now, and it said, "The habits you make, they compound, and once you hit that level of success, people are going to call it an overnight success."
Yeah, yep.
And I think that's something that we normalize so much in society today, is like, that dude just randomly got good at this, and it's like, no, nobody saw the work that was put in, and I think that's something you highlight really well.
And a lot of what we do is so behind the scenes, and it comes back to being good or great, right? Like, people love the thought about being great. Not a lot of people like the work that goes into it. One of my favorite memes that I've ever seen is it's the picture of the ballerina, 2 ballerinas' feet. One is without the shoe on, and it's all gnarly and nasty, and the toenails are gone, and there's tape over them, and all that stuff. And the other one is in the real pretty ballerina slipper, right, up on pointed toes. And it's like, a lot of people love to think that they're great, but aren't into the work that truly goes into it. And it's just exactly what you're saying. That stuff just compounds over time. It's, and I talk about that with recruits a lot. I say it a little bit differently than you did, but we have a lot of people that come through our program that, Hastings Merrick, where did she come from? Well, she's been working really hard for multiple years in a row at this point. And this is just coming to fruition finally, type of thing.
And you mentioned Tick, Tick, Boom earlier. Going back to that really quickly, I watched that film towards the beginning of my track season junior year for the very first time, and I was going through my first severe injury, and that line that you talked about at the end, with her saying, "You just need to keep writing after you failed," that deeply resonated with me. Like, that hit me really, really hard, because I was at a point where I was just devastated. I was like, I don't know where my season's going to be. I don't know what I'm going to do. And that really hit me. So even if you're not in the theater or anything, I highly recommend watching that film if you're going through any sort of injury, any sort of trial and error type of thing in the sport of running. That's a very beneficial mindset that you need to have. You just keep working. But
another technical difficulty. I apologize once again, but we are figuring it out, and give us a little break. This is episode 2, so give us a little break. But while we figure this out, we're gonna segue into our next question. Here, and
So going off of the whole topic we were just having about trusting the process and really putting in a lot of work. If you could give one piece of advice to somebody that's trying to become great at anything, be that sport, business, any kind of skill, what would that one piece of advice be?
Yeah, show up and be consistent. Kind of a lot what we were just talking about. I think Steve Magnus posts a lot about, he did some research with his team at one point in time, and the people that showed up to practice every day were the ones that got better. So it was literally just showing up, just being there and doing what you're supposed to do. And so, that's going to make you better just by doing that. But, creating that habit for whatever you want to do. I'm reading one of Ryan Holiday's books right now on discipline. And he talks about, there was a woman who was a single mom who wanted to become a writer. And how did she become a writer? She got up every morning before her kids got up, and she wrote. And she just did that every day. And if you can write a half a page a day, eventually you'll get to a full book.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it comes down to, and so just showing up and continuing to just hone your craft and try to get better, because the more you write, the better writer you become. The more you run, the better runner you become. The more you work on math problems, the better mathematician you're going to become. Whatever. Graphic design, if you're going to be designing logos, the more logos you design, the better you're going to get at designing logos.
The more you do podcasts, the less technical difficulties you have. I think that's a great take. I think that's like a perfect way to answer that question. And I would just follow up with with that consistency, there is always that lack of motivation at some point in the process. And how would you say, how do you bring yourself to be disciplined enough to do that? To get up every day and just get yourself through at least that benchmark?
I think that's something that, I don't know if it's an inner trait that I have personally, but it's something that I've always just done. It needs to get done. You just need to do it, type of thing, and just always trying to remember back to what your ultimate goals are. There's been plenty of days during my running career where I was like, why am I doing this? I'm not seeing the rewards. I've been putting in all this time. Rewards come on their own time. They don't come on your time. That comes back to that instant gratification thing.
That's really good.
And so, Carter's a really good example of that. His freshman year was a frickin' disaster.
Yep.
It was just one injury after another, and there were multiple times where he was sitting here like, Coach, why am I doing this? If this is how my career is going to go, I don't think I can do this. And so you just have to have the conversation of, hey man, it's going to get better. You just have to you're doing the right things. You just have to keep doing those things. And eventually you'll come out of the tunnel and things will get better. But you have to consistently just keep doing what you're doing. And I've had that conversation with other people, and they've made the decision, this is not worth it to me. I'd much rather be able to go out and party on the weekends, or, I'd much rather be involved in music theater, I have my music, or, whatever it happens to be. There's a million different things that kids want to get involved in. I have to work, I have to do this, I have to do that. But for whatever reason, from a personal standpoint, I had multiple times where I wanted to quit running, and I just kept showing up, and I kept showing up, and I kept showing up. And once again, I have this stupid running streak going that I have no reason to keep this thing going, but it was just a decision that I made September 14th, 2012, that was what I was going to do, and I've just
stuck with it.
That's just what I do. Yeah. And so I make time for it every day. So I think some of that's just kind of inherently just in me, but I think I'm reading a book about discipline right now. So it's having the discipline to set up what are the important things to you and making sure that you're keeping those going.
And I think it's, so over the last few months I had mono. I had to miss the end of my cross-country season. And through that process, I made some bad decisions with delegating my time with what I was doing to get myself better in that time. And throughout that process, I slowly started to just realize that the most important thing that you can do when you're in an uncontrollable situation is just, you need to have a blind trust. And that's not good in necessarily every situation, but for things that you can't control and situations that you can't do anything about, you need to have a blind trust. You feel like crap in the morning, you don't want to go do your run, you have a blind trust that your coach gave you this thing to do, it's going to work out in the end. You have to trust your process, you have to trust your training plan, so it's trying to instill that without learning from your mistakes. That's a very important thing, I think.
So Ryan Holiday talks about Stoic philosophy a lot. That's kind of where he started his writing and all that kind of stuff. Not really, but yes. That's how he became famous.
Yeah.
And the Stoics talk about a live time or dead time a lot. And so there was a big jump that happened in the running community through COVID. And there were a lot of people that got a lot better during that time, and there were a lot of people that just faded away and you never heard from again. And I think that alive time versus dead time is just so, it comes back to consistency, it comes back to showing up, it comes back to taking advantage of no matter what is going on, are you going to get better in this moment, or are you going to allow yourself to fall into bad habits?
Yeah.
So
I saw this quote also in a book. Books are great.
reading is good.
Reading is
kids.
really good. Reading is really good.
Read, kids.
I saw this quote, and it was, winners and losers want the same thing, right? We all have the same goal in mind, but it's about what you do and the habits you have that take you to that level.
Yeah.
And that one really hit me. I immediately texted Michael Doris about that one. But I think that really sums up of, like, you have to have that discipline, you have to have that drive, whether you feel like it or not, whether it's 20 degrees or 80 degrees, whether it's downpour, raining, and hailing, or if it's completely clear, you have to be able to get outside. You know, you have to be able to, get to work. You have to be able to turn on the computer and start working. You have to be able to, whatever it is, you have to be able to do it. And I think that quote sums that up very well.
Yep.
All right, so let's go into the next section. Some rapid fire questions, straight up.
Absolutely.
Because that was a great conversation, but like let's lighten the mood a little bit. We're gonna give you some rapid fire questions. You're allowed to elaborate. You don't have to just say one word.
Okay.
And there's a few of them on here you can elaborate on. We can have a conversation about them, but I'm gonna start. All right. We talked about greatness. We talked about goodness. When you get to that, you talk about the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Do you have LeBron James or Michael Jordan as the greatest basketball player of all time?
As much as I hate to say this, being a guy from Ohio, I got to go Michael Jordan.
I agree. I completely agree.
I mean,
He revolutionized it.
He did. My dad had because I was, obviously, we all talk about this a lot in practice, and we've got some people on our team that I don't agree with their
the
opinions.
LeBron takes are terrible. It's terrible.
Or Devin Booker over Michael Jordan.
Yeah, or like DeMar DeRozan in the 80s would be the best player of all time.
My dad had, because I was talking to him about it, because he's a big sports guy as well, and he said, if Michael Jordan didn't exist, the game of basketball wouldn't be what it is today.
100%.
And so, I think we got to take that into account. I think what LeBron has done in terms of, 18 to 40 years old, he's the only teenager to play into his 40s, and he's won a bunch of championships, and he's going to have every record by the time he's done from the scoring on down. It's pretty incredible, but he's just been at it for so long, and Jordan's career just didn't last as long. I think.
Going off that, do you think LeBron's got a lot of time left? You think he's going to be playing?
He said
like
7 years in an interview.
Yeah,
he said 7 years. That's why I'm asking.
7 more years. I mean, the way that he takes care of himself, I could see that. His role will obviously switch.
Oh yeah,
he will become a guy that's a locker room guy who's
glue
coming
guy.
off.
Glue
guy coming off the
inspiring
bench.
the next generation. Yeah.
But I could see him continuing to play. In the
down
NBA.
the line.
Who was the guy that played with him in Miami?
Udonis Haslem.
No, that also played in Cleveland. He was on both championship teams.
Wasn't Wade, because Wade was on the Cavs when we were bad.
No. Anyways, that's the type of guy that I could see LeBron transitioning.
I forget his name. Was it Richard, or was it Richard Jefferson?
No.
James Jones?
Yeah, it might have been Jones.
It might have been James Jones.
Yeah, it might have been James Jones.
I gotta look that up. But all right, let's go to the next question.
While we're looking that up, we'll transition into another GOAT debate, quote unquote GOAT debate that we can have, at least in the modern time, for running. Jakob Ingebrigtsen or Josh Kerr?
I mean, right now, Jakob holds how many world records? He's won how many Diamond League races? I was listening to a pod the other day, the Coffee Club. I was listening to the Coffee Club, and they were talking about how Jakob might be a little delusional with the fact he still doesn't see it as a rivalry, but he doesn't really lose in the Diamond League races. And the one time that he lost, they were saying, I like this take on it, Kerr didn't beat him, he lost. Because he made some tactical bad decisions and all that kind of stuff. I just... we think of... When you ask that question, we automatically think of Jakob getting fourth in the 1500. We forget about the fact that he dominated the 5K.
Oh
He still hasn't really been beat in a competitive 5K.
Right.
Like that.
And he beat some really good guys in that 5K, and he made it look like he was running at the OAC championships.
Dude, like I watch that
it
final
was
sometimes,
ridiculous.
and I'm like, is this the prelim that I'm watching, or like?
I think, and the other thing with Kerr is Kerr didn't win this past Olympics either, and so Kerr's won. He set the 2-mile world record, and he won the Prefontaine Classic, and if the two of those guys essentially made that 1500 the greatest race that I've ever watched. They made it that because of the trash talking and the build up and we were all waiting a year to watch that race.
It was like one of the most anticipated.
Comes out of nowhere and wins it.
It was one of the most anticipated races of all time, I think.
But if you're talking about who is the better overall runner, I mean Jakob's resume is pretty impressive.
That's a good take.
He's pretty
Very
impressive.
nice. That's a good take. By the way, it was James Jones.
Okay,
James Jones. He's a glue guy. So our next question, in the back of the camera, you can see this tree with no leaves on it. Do you prefer winter when there's 2 feet of snow out there, right? Terrible roads, or do you prefer the nice warm summer?
I have terrible circulations in my hands and feet. I got into bed the other night, and I wear these like thick wool socks around the house that most people's feet would be sweating in, and I accidentally touched Becky's leg with my foot, and she was like, "Oh my God, your feet are freezing. Didn't you have socks on?" I was like, "No, I had socks on." So I much prefer summer weather. Like we lived through the hottest summer in Wichita, Kansas history. To that point, we had 80 consecutive days over 100 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
Over 100 days over 100 degrees
Jeez.
total.
It's ridiculous.
I would much rather run in that than I would in 10 degrees, 5 degrees.
That's how I am too. I completely agree. I'm not a winter guy. Yeah. I mean, I still get out there, obviously, but not a winter guy. Actually, more this year for me personally.
Now, I will say, obviously, I've lived all over the country. I lived out in California. I always tell the story. I put Christmas lights up on my house on Christmas Eve one year in shorts and a t-shirt. It was 70-some degrees outside.
Oh my gosh.
I appreciated that weather a ton, but I don't think you appreciate the spring and the summer nearly as much when you don't have this to live through.
Yeah,
you're right.
So.
Also, this is actually a follow-up question off that. You said you put up Christmas lights in shorts and t-shirt. Does that kill the vibe of Christmas? Because it's not
different.
cold out?
It's different, for sure. But, it wasn't that cold here this year.
It wasn't. It was like 40.
Yeah,
it was like 40. It was nice out.
We've had some warm
There was one run
Christmases.
we went on where we had shorts on, and it's like December 26th.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All right.
So it's different.
Yeah, it's different. Definitely different.
So this next question, I think, for people that know you personally, this is gonna you're gonna know the answer, but for people that don't, it might be a little bit of shock. Track or cross country?
Track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty common take.
My skill set was definitely more geared towards track. So from and I think there's something very simplistic to the fact that you're on an oval that everybody's running. It's equal no matter where you are in the country. It's a 400 meter rubberized surface. Blah 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 blah. Now there are different surfaces. Our surface is better than most and all that kind of stuff. But there is something to be said for fall and coming back to school, new beginnings. Excitement about what might be. We've had a break, and so you kind of set the tone for the rest of the year with fall. I think cross country is the ultimate team sport. I think a lot of people would think I'm crazy to hear me say that, but it really is a true team sport, and you have to have 5 really good athletes in order to score, and then the other people are offsetting and all these other things. There's also no other sport where everybody stands, all 350 people stand on the same starting line, and there's only one person that gets to win and one team that gets to win a team title.
It's truly different.
Mount Union and North Central played for a national championship last night. John Carroll also didn't get to play football at the same time, and Wheaton College didn't get to play football at the same time, and John Hopkins got bumped out, so they didn't get to participate at the same time. all of us can come together on a cross-country course, you can have 10 national champs standing on the starting line at the same time.
But only one will win.
But only one person can win that national championship.
That's actually a really good take. I've never looked at it that way.
So how many national champs, how many All-Americans are standing on the starting line?
Because you look at it like, you know what I mean? Like, you look at it like, that if that team didn't get knocked out because of this stupid score, right? Would they have won the Super Bowl? Right? Would they have beaten the team that won?
Right.
This, you can actually look and be like, dude, like, the proof's right here.
Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
They're not in the playoff.
Yeah.
They're not in the playoff, but they beat
Notre Dame.
That's a good
take. That's a good take.
They beat Notre Dame.
I never looked at it that way.
Let's get 3 teams playing football at once. That's what I'm saying.
All at the same time.
We've talked about that before. Like, have like 5 soccer teams all on the same field. With
Oh my gosh. Chaos. All right, next question. Best genre of music?
Oh, that's
because you listen to a lot.
I do. I would say that my favorite genre when I kind of think of like what I cut my teeth on in high school, the 90s grunge, the Seattle scene. That's kind of how I came up. That and like the pop punk, if you want to go that direction, because like Green Day and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and that whole like era is really probably where the roots of my own finding my own music comes from. And then I love music, so I love this question. I inherited my dad's record collection, so that has a huge influence on me too. The Doors, the Beatles, Bob Seger, Pink Floyd. I found Led Zeppelin on my own. So, you know, the classic rock genre also, you know, that's essentially who influenced the grunge music, who then influenced, you know, the stuff that we listen to now.
Because we listen to a lot of different music during practice. During practice, you got something new on every day, new genre every day, new type of music every day.
Some of it is I also like learning the new trends of music, and so you know, obviously Dylan makes his own music, and I really like his music, but his genre that he makes now, he'll shoot me stuff and I'll shoot him stuff on, hey dude, you got to check this stuff out. And it's funny because he's kind of going through a punk phase, and so some of the stuff is stuff like one of the bands that he sent me is like a band that's opened up for Blink-182. You know, and I've gone and seen them a bunch of times, and you know, so I would say that the grunge music is kind of where everything else like emanates from for me, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then, there's even some like I get ragged on because I'm not as into Gavin Ross's style of music and the newer hip hop or R&B or whatever the hell you want to call it. And, I do like some of the like '90s rap music and
old school
hip hop music. You know, Dilated Peoples and Black Eyed Peas before Fergie joined. Some of that stuff. Some of the more underground, Jurassic 5. Some of that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, your music taste is very advanced. You listen to like so much. Like it's very thought out. Like you look into a lot. We listen to. It's like we're listening to something new and different every day. Genuinely. So our last rapid fire question we got for you, Dylan.
We have favorite place to run anywhere.
I mean, you've been all across the country, so you let us know. Like,
it all comes back to Virginia Kendall for me. The CVMP. You know, my first hardcore core memory of going out on like a first like legit run with my buddy Jack, who was one of the biggest influences in me getting into running, Jack Morrison. And there was a guy that ran for Kent State at the time who was a lifeguard at Silver Lake, where I grew up. And he ran cross country at Kent. Jack and the other guy, I think his name was John, I can't remember his last name. But the two of them took me to the ledges at Virginia Kendall, and we ran for an hour. That was by far the longest run I'd ever gone on. I was a rising freshman in high school.
Okay.
Went on an hour-long run through Virginia Kendall, and I just thought it was like the coolest thing in the world. You know, so much so that when I started looking at colleges and I started talking to coaches and stuff, like I didn't really even think to ask, like, what type of trail system do you have? Because I assumed that if Akron, Ohio had this massive trail system and all of these things, that surely everywhere in the country must have this. I was sorely mistaken.
Yeah.
That is not the case.
We are very lucky.
I have been able to live in a lot of places with some really cool running. I spent a summer in Boulder, Colorado. I spent a summer in Berea, Ohio. The Cleveland Metro Parks. Probably starting at either the Nature Center or Mastic. That 6
That's
miles
a great
there.
spot. That's a great spot.
It's probably my second favorite place to run. Honestly,
that's one of my favorite spots. Personally,
it's so pretty. It's right next to the river. It's kind of back and serene and quiet back in there, and but Boulder. I've been to Flagstaff. I've been to Portland. I've been to Eugene. I've been to San Diego. I've been to a lot of these different running meccas, and honestly, I would put the trail system in Northeast Ohio against any of those places. Kidding. Yeah, I would. I didn't get to do a ton of running in Flagstaff just because we were there for track meets.
Yeah.
But I've been to Boulder, and I've been up in there, and I've spent a ton of time up there running around, and what we have, we are so unbelievably fortunate. If we were at 7,000 feet or 5,000 feet, or if we had Nike in Cleveland or Akron.
Do you think this would be one of the running capitals?
I think this would be one of it. This stuff is tough, but they get this in Park City, and they get this in
Boulder
Flagstaff,
as well, right?
and they get this in Boulder.
Yeah.
Boulder, they'll get this, but it'll be melted by the end of the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
The sun comes out. They have the sun,
yeah.
Which we don't.
Obviously.
Year, so.
Very big cloud of gray sometimes.
Yeah, I think the ledges or starting at Pine Hollow and running down to the lake, up to the ledges, out to the Octagon and back. It's like a 10-mile loop. That's one of my go-tos. That's one of my favorites. So when I lived out west and we would come home, one of my first runs I would go on. I would always go to Pine Hollow, and I would meet up with some buddies, and we would do that 10-mile loop.
That's sick. So yeah, that's all of our rapid fire questions.
Cool.
So yeah,
appreciate you guys.
All right, so that's all the time we have for today, but I really appreciate you guys getting here. Coach, thank you for giving us your insight on good versus great, and we'll see you guys in the next episode for sure.
Yeah, this is awesome, guys. I'm really excited for what this can become, and appreciate you guys taking the time and getting it started. Because as we just talked about, you got to start, right?
You got to start.
You got to launch, and then you got to just keep showing up. So hopefully we can be consistent.
Yep.
Keep showing up.
Yeah.
Doing this, right? That's always the tough part.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Finding time, but yeah, appreciate you guys.
We appreciate you, Coach.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have made it all the way to the end of this episode, make sure you leave a 5-star review or give us a like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. Once again, guys, thank you very much, and we will see you in the next episode of Relaxed and Fast. Peace out.